This machine is carving out a life-size Ford Mustang from hundreds of pounds of clay. It's arguably the most important step in designing a car, even though most car owners know nothing about the process. Car companies have used clay models for almost 100 years on nearly every car you see on the road. From this Mustang to this $28 million Rolls-Royce.
I mean, I come across people every single day that do not understand the concept of why we would make a full-size car out of clay and then finish it in a way where it looks exactly the same as the production vehicle.
But today, companies are straying away from clay. Modeling is an expensive process that goes up in price based on the company and the complexity of the vehicle. Exotic hypercar brands like Bugatti have dropped upwards of $650,000. Automakers now have high-tech virtual reality software that lets them design and examine every inch of their cars. So why do some companies still use up to 100 tons of clay each year? And why do some models take years to build? Clay models are built in top-secret studios that are even more restricted than manufacturing plants. Inside, designers develop vehicles that haven't even been announced yet. This is the car industry's Area 51.
Yeah, I mean, we work in a secure facility that's only a few members of the site can actually get into. So it's special permissions to get into here.
Mark Sadler has been a clay modeler for decades and now manages teams for Bentley. He worked on signature models like the Bentayga SUV. The clay comes in bars or cylinders the size of tennis ball cans. It's closer to the Play-Doh we played with as kids. Traditional water-based ceramic clay would dry out and harden too fast. This specialty clay is more sticky and malleable. Modeling teams first turned design sketches into multiple scaled-down clay models, about just over a meter long. Once they decide on the design they want to move forward with, 3D scanners convert it into digital graphics. Those can be edited further with software that can include VR aspects. That data is then transferred to a milling machine. The modeling team first builds a frame out of steel and wood to support foam blocks. Making a whole model out of solid clay would be too expensive and weigh at least several tons. To make the clay more workable, they heat it for 24 hours in a special oven set to around 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Modelers spend a couple of days slathering 1 to 4 inches of warm, soft clay on different parts of the model. Once it cools to room temperature and stiffens, it's ready for shaping. In just 1 to 2 days, the milling machine can carve out a full-size model. But it's not close to being finished yet. Modelers still have to smooth out surfaces, corners, and edges. This is where craftsmanship becomes critical.
I've met people that have come from the porcelain industry that have migrated very quickly, very easily into the clay modelling side. But I've also met people that no matter how much training you give them, how much guidance, they just don't get it.
They also carve out important details, like hoods, roof lines, and fenders, all by hand.
I mean, you can have at least probably 60, 70 tools in your box that do similar things, but do it in a slightly different way.
Their tools may look like medieval surgical instruments.
Very, very, very simple things. I mean, this is quite a crude tool, but it's almost like a cheese grater. So you can actually scrape a lot of clay off, but keep the surface quite flat and level.
But this strange collection of razor blades and wires has been responsible for some of history's most beautiful cars. Clay modeling dates back to the 1930s, but the technology has changed drastically. Now, computer-driven machines take hours to do what used to take days or even weeks of manual labor. Still, the tools used for actual sculpting are mostly the same.
This is a very simple tool that we use, and it's just you just scrape it like that. There's these what we call slicks. Now, what these are very thin steel, but what it allows you to do is to shape, and then you can use that shape to drag down the surface of the clay.
The real advantage of clay is versatility. Modelers can experiment and make a change that may or may not work, but can be easily fixed. If modelers make a mistake, they use a hot air gun to soften the area and either add more material or remove it. To give the most complete picture of what the vehicle will look like, 3D printers produce headlights, grills, mirrors, and more.
The hard parts, or the three-dimensional printed parts, they develop with the model, so they will get more and more detailed as they go along, and the materials in those parts as well will develop. So what might be a painted part to begin with will end up being a crystal part at the end.
The team uses 3D scanners to create a digital version of the model. That way, it can be shared instantly with the company's engineers and designers all over the world. Near the end of the process, clay models are covered in a glossy film called die-knock that resembles painted sheet metal. It gives modelers an idea of what the actual car will look like. The film can help identify mistakes in the bodywork that need to be corrected, and modelers are no strangers to corrections. Despite how much faster scanners and milling machines have made this process, it can still take years to finish a clay model. Over a dozen changes can be made to the model before it's given the green light. Car designers may continue to adjust details in the bodywork by just millimeters. Engineers will make changes to its structure that improve the vehicle's crash test ratings. When sculpting these different changes, modelers rely on one tool everyone is familiar with: tape.
The tape that we use, it's a Scotch tape, black tape, so that sticks onto the clay, so that when the designers want to change something, or we want a more defined guide to help us clean up surfaces, we can put this on and then we can work a surface to it.
While these simple tweaks can be done by hand, major changes require the model to be completely remilled from updated data. The combination of materials and the amount of labor is what leads to those six-figure price tags for automakers. Bentley tries sticking to a strict 12-month timeframe, but it's not the case for everyone. Designers spent over 4 years making this Ford F-150 Raptor model out of nearly 2,000 pounds of clay. No matter the company, once the modeling team starts going, they're racing against the clock.
The biggest challenge we always have is time, and especially if I've got the head of the department coming out, the head designer coming out and say, no, I'm not happy with that, I need to change this, that, the wing, the whole body side. It's trying to balance everybody's wishes and requests and what they actually want to see, and to hit that deadline that we've got to hit.
So what makes these expensive clay models more useful than virtual ones? For one, automakers can test a car's aerodynamics. Computer programs help, but they need a real-life model to thoroughly test this. To do it, they use a giant wind tunnel. As a massive fan spins, engineers use a smoke wand to see how easily air will flow over, under, and around the car on the road. It's called drag, and it helps measure how much energy a vehicle needs to move. This informs how much fuel the car will eventually consume. In some extreme cases, companies can spend over 1,000 hours in the tunnel testing a model's design before committing to full-scale production. And modelers are standing by, ready to make adjustments on the spot. But most importantly, models are used to see how a car prototype actually looks. They can see things like how natural light plays on its curves. Only a real 3D model can show how it will look when it's actually on the road.
You're trying to create something that will grab somebody's attention, and it will almost get the heartstrings going, get the emotions going. And sometimes you just can't quite get it there with digital or VR. You just can't do it. So it needs that hands-on process.
No matter how much more accurate and reliable VR design technology becomes, clay modelers like Mark don't see their practice disappearing anytime soon.
You're always going to need a physical model to verify the data that you receive. I can see the generations coming through now that are more used to using different software, virtual reality, and there will be more confidence in what they see virtually. It does help the process. It definitely helps speed up the development of these products. But I think there will ultimately always be a need for a clay model of some form.